Let's get started. Welcome to today's webinar, Beyond Triggers, Smarter Borrower Targeting with Pre-Screen and Propensity Scoring. I'm Robin Wells, Vice President of Product here at FPN, and I'll be your moderator. We're excited to have you with us today. Today's session will provide an overview of the recent trigger legislation and market impacts. Then we'll focus on how pre-screen and propensity modeling can help you move beyond costly, saturated trigger-based campaigns. You'll learn how these tools can sharpen borrower targeting, improve recapture and retention, and deliver measurable ROI, all while aligning with your growth strategy. Not too far. There we go. We're joined today by two outstanding panelists. We have Tyler Sawyer, the President and Chief Strategy Officer at FPN. Tyler brings over 25 years of experience across the mortgage and housing industry, and he currently drives FPN strategy for vision and growth initiatives. We also have Ivan Ahmed, the Senior Director of Product Management at Experian. He leads Experian's mortgage prospecting suite and has been instrumental in bringing Experian's property data asset to market. With a background as a fintech co-founder, he brings a deep understanding of both technology and lending. So here's how we're going to spend our time today. Tyler's going to start with a look at recent trigger legislation and its market impact. Then we'll walk us through the future of pre-screening and how propensity modeling can be applied in practice. And then Tyler's going to share some practical steps for implementation and integration into your workflows. We'll also close today's session with some Q&A, but feel free to ask questions in the chat throughout the presentation. Happy to take any questions throughout. You should see the chat function, and when you post those questions, they're just going to come only to the presenters and the organizers. So please send those over anytime throughout the presentation. Okay, I think we can get started. Tyler, can you kick us off by recapping how we got here with the trigger legislation?
Yeah, sure will. And thank you, Robin. I appreciate the warm introduction, and really I'm honored to be a part of the discussion here with you and Ivan. Before I dive specifically into the Home Buyers Privacy Protection Act, which is very meaty in of itself, I did want to verbally walk through a little trigger 101, right? At times also referred to as inquiries or events, and really discuss how we got to this point, right? I recognize most of us on the call are familiar already. However, as I look through the list of attendees, I do see that there are some fresh faces. So just allow me a few minutes to expand here. So the first thing I just want to discuss a little bit about is, what are triggers, right? What are they to begin with, right? Triggers are really a way in which to capture those consumers who are actively seeking a mortgage and trigger that intent, right, through a hard credit hit with one or multiple bureaus. And really, there's a difference between what is known as a hard and soft credit hit, where a hard hit generally represents the process of actively applying for a mortgage and may impact a credit score. And a soft hit is really more of a review of the credit and therefore does not impact the score directly, right? So these solutions are currently available from all bureaus, with Experian really leading the way with the real-time events or RTEs. But then you also see it from the other bureaus as well on doing some similar type of programs and also employing some daily event processes, daily, weekly, monthly. So really for all of us in the call who've gone through the mortgage lending life cycle at a personal level, right, such as myself, you really may have experienced that moment that you gave the okay to do a credit check with one lender as you initiate a loan, really only to get calls or emails or texts later in the day or the next one from multiple other lenders seeking your business. And in some cases, what they'll be giving you is something very similar to what you've already started on the process of. In other cases, it's going to be a little bit different than what you're seeing. But generally, that is the trigger business in a nutshell, right? They're being alerted, they're reaching on out to you, trying to win your business, knowing they're in the market for a loan. Over time, the relevance of the hard credit has gone down just a little bit, right? Given a series of market changes over the course of the last few years, and really a bureau response by offering something called the pre-approval process of starting with a soft hit that actually carries the information all the way through to the hard hit right before closing, right? So that really leads to the next question of, what are some of the current trigger challenges? What are they experiencing today? What are lenders experiencing today? How do we get to the point that there's this new Home Buyer Act? Well, first, let's start with that last one, right? The one that I just kind of described, where some lenders and consumers have initiated that pre-approval process with the soft hit, then carrying it right all the way to closing, right before closing, when a hard hit is still required. Kind of prior to 2024, I'd say that pre-qualification was really the soft hit solution, which I would still say is a market-leading option for early offers, naturally. But the changes made last year led to a reduction in some trigger impact, right? As those specific consumers are just far too down the path to really entertain alternatives. So therefore, as triggers are coming in, they might have only been days away from the closing table. Secondly, each bureau offers triggers in similar and different ways, which can cause some misunderstandings in the market. There's the misconception that all bureaus, for example, get the same hard hits, and generally that's not the case from our experience, right? In fact, there's a lot of crossover kind of towards the beginning of the year. We found here at FPN that to be less the case as the year went on. I'll give you an example. As we look at one bureau set of triggers and then kind of did a bolt-on afterwards to see, hey, where is there a difference? We found there's about a 30% uptick in additional hits. That's been changing over the course of the last 10 and a half months, where we've seen that actually increase to somewhere between about 60 or 65% of an uptick, meaning there's a lot more single bureau hard hits that are occurring. Really, another challenge that has had many lenders from getting the same leads at the same time, right? Because that's happening when you're getting all these trigger leads in a daily or kind of real-time events. As a result, consumers are getting inundated with communications, naturally causing confusions as offers are coming in by way of phone calls, texts, emails, and mailers. And then, some of the lenders and brokers are challenged with getting to them first, right? And there might be a lot of that initial noise, right, from the consumer, or excuse me, from the various lenders to the consumer. Now, even though we just identified a number of those existing challenges already in place, that there is some argument, right, that triggers may benefit a consumer because as multiple offerings are made to them, they might have some more favorable terms, right, naturally. So if you kind of put it on paper in an apples to apples type of format, one might see that one might be a little bit better than the other. But frankly, for even someone, I would say, well-versed in the lending life cycle, you can still easily get overwhelmed. And that's what they're seeing with the general community. So, as a result, right, we ask the question, why are they going away, right? And I think kind of given what we've talked a little bit about here already, it's fairly obvious, right? And kind of given everything discussed and the direct impact and confusion to the consumers, the mortgage industry really stood by and strongly supported this upcoming change, right? So therefore, President Trump signed the overwhelmingly supported Home Buyers Privacy Protection Act, otherwise known as HPPA or the HR 2808. Right, which had been contemplated for many years. I mean, there's been a lot of discussions around this for multiple years, and it finally occurred just a few months back. But like everything, there are exemptions, right? And you're going to talk about some of them right here. I should stress to make sure to engage with your own legal counsel on the details behind each of the exceptions, right? Because it's going to be a little bit different for how you're going to be impacted and what could be done given your unique circumstances. But from a general perspective, right, as we talk through those 4 exemptions, the first one is consumers who have provided explicit consent to receive solicitations. Second is if you're the originator of the consumer's current residential mortgage loan. The third is if you're the current servicer or portfolio owner of that residential mortgage loan. Or lastly, you're an insured depository institution or credit union with an active account for the consumer, right? So those are kind of those 4 key areas. As noted before, this really comes into effect on March 5th of 2026. However, each bureau may limit the trigger use prior to that. So make sure that you're staying well engaged with your vendor, be that FPN, be that with Experian or another bureau or vendor. Just make sure that you're effectively communicating when those services are going to be moving, right? You also see on that keynote at the bottom of the slide as well, that the bill really only applies to mortgage prospective triggers or acquisition marketing for net new leads, right? Trigger leads used for risk and retention, otherwise known as account review. They're not going to be impacted as it falls underneath that third exemption of the current servicer or portfolio owner of that residential mortgage still can continue to monitor those loans in a trigger type of program. Can you go to the next slide, please, unless there's any questions?
I don't see any questions, but I know we've had a few folks join since we started. So I just want a quick reminder, if you would like to ask questions, there is a Q&A chat that you can send them to. It is anonymous, so please feel free to ask any questions and we'll be addressing those throughout the presentation. All right, so Tyler, can you tell us a little bit about the market reaction?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a couple of key things to discuss here, right? And I'll kind of run through each of them. First, this is going to result in fewer consumer communications due to these stricter outreach permissions, right? So, consumers will not only receive communication in the event of one, unless it's in the event of one of the four previously explained exemptions are hit, number one. But this does not prohibit a consumer from looking at multiple options at various lenders. They just have to own their own experience. So they can still go after lender A, B, C, broker A, B, C. That will just be up to them. The triggers will not apply unless one of the four exceptions come into play. There'll be a reduced competition for the borrower's attention and offers during this mortgage inquiry process. Therefore, consumers are going to be in the driver's seat for who they want to engage with and when. And it's also important to note, and we'll talk about this in upcoming slides, that this impacts only those scenarios where mortgage triggers specifically were being utilized to initiate a communication, right? So really what that means is things like pre-screen will provide important data and insights for consumers to receive offers and will allow to be continued to. Additionally, lenders dependent on trigger leads, they have to rethink their marketing and acquisition strategies, resulting in many being required to alter their overall strategy. And the sooner that's done, the better. And I'm probably going to hit on that a few times through the course of this discussion, right? As discussed, the mortgage triggers are an easy way to determine if a consumer is in the market, and that emphasizes their ability to effectively sell against others, pushing similar agendas with their own similar set of lending solutions. Well, now all of that really needs to change, certainly by March 5th, but between now and then is the time to be able to check that out. So while that legislation doesn't come into effect until March, understanding what works and doesn't work now is critical to maintain and grow market share and close those loans. Lenders are going to have to pivot to alternate strategies along the way, naturally, right? I think this is fairly obvious, and that's what we're here to talk a little bit about. And I think the key thing is it's going to have to align to your own evolving business strategy, and it's going to tap into your own differentiating factors, right? Just to give you a couple examples, there could be like a market segmentation focus. There could be a geographic concentration. There could be an emphasis on certain data as you're aligning into some of your pre-screen needs and strategy to examine things like trended data, property data, propensity score, revolving debt, amounts, right? Even evolving trends, right, for consumers. All of that needs to kind of find its way directly on into your strategy, of which our solutions can ultimately help you with. I think one key driver from my perspective, and I think you would share this with me, is that ability to move very quickly to capture this ever-changing landscape with things like interest rate changes, property valuation adjustments, consumer sentiment. I mean, we've seen a number of changes just over the course of the last 10 days, right? And so it's really important that you're able to move very quickly. Kind of this fourth bullet here is that the loan offer aggregators remain well-positioned given their experience in a trigger-based sales and borrower interaction. However, that's going to have to adjust and requires a certain amount of retraining, right? So, for example, how do you sell to a consumer that's not actively looking for a loan, but could benefit from a lender's differentiators? You want to be able to, deeply understand a consumer's needs to quickly pivot to alternate products that may fit better in the borrower's objectives. This is a little bit of a different mindset than just leveraging mortgage inquiries. Even consistent training, which I think you're probably already performing, that utilizes embedded changes to the ecosystem as a whole. We talked a little bit about that. Things like Vantage score approval happening a couple of months ago, or market price adjustments. All that is critical for the LO to be well trained in as they're engaging with the borrower with a lot of these new solutions in place. Finally, there is a shift towards alternate solutions. I've seen it already. I think many of us have seen this already. And these are things like, pre-screened modeled audiences and first-party data activation, right? In fact, that's what we're really here to talk about. So therefore, allow me to pass the mic over to Ivan, who will walk through some of those solutions, starting with pre-screen. But before I do that, I'll check in with Robin again.
Questions yet, so we'll turn it over to Ivan.
All right, thanks everybody. Hello everyone. I'm sorry that I couldn't be on camera. We have the Experian folks had some issues with our firewall, so had some trouble getting in. But so you can hear me, and we've got some pretty cool things to cover in the next few slides. So as Tyler's mentioned, there's going to be a shift in your strategy. There's no doubt about that. What is that shift going to be? I think it's going to be more important than ever to become more proactive and intentional about your prospecting approach, and that's going to be because the curtailment of prospect triggers means that you can no longer purchase trigger leads, or inquiry-based leads for net new prospecting of consumers, and that means that you'll have to be more intentional and more strategic on how you target consumers and maximize your marketing spend so that you can maximize the opportunity for conversion. And so what that means is that there has to be a shift in the mindset from being sort of a sales representative to a sales advisor, right? And finding the right solution that makes sense given the market circumstances and market conditions, but also the buy box characteristics that are subjective to you as a lender, but also the characteristics of the borrower, right? So pull in more demographic information, understand from a more holistic approach the borrower's needs, understand the collateral characteristics of the consumer. So pull in various disparate data sets and get a more holistic and macro level understanding of the consumer so that when you're targeting that consumer, you can maximize the likelihood of conversion. So you'll want to prioritize leads that are higher converting. You want long gone are sort of is sort of the time and age where you can buy up leads and it becomes a numbers game, right? So leads are really cheap, and the cost of acquisition is a little higher, but you're getting the leads for cheap, so it doesn't really matter. It's a numbers game. Now you may need to spend a little bit more on a lead, but the benefit is that your cost of acquisition should also be slightly lower because you're more proactive and intentional about finding consumers that have the greatest propensity to convert. So the takeaway message here is be more intentional, more proactive, and more strategic in how you target consumers, and find those consumers first before someone else does. And the way to do that is going to be through some of these solutions that we're going to cover. Next slide, please. So one of the alternative solutions that exist in the market today, and that both FPN and Experian sort of deliver today, are things called, and most of you are aware of the existence of this, is propensity scores. So these propensity models essentially identify consumers that have the greatest likelihood to convert and are in the market within the next 30 to 90 days. And these scores leverage a number of credit metadata factors in identifying a consumer's buying intent, and these scores help to identify consumers for outreach campaigns, right? So what we find is that these have become kind of a commodity offering by most of the bureaus and CRAs and other other providers in the market, even from a property data perspective. But what becomes what should be happening is the layering of these attributes with other behavioral characteristics. So what that means is taking these scores and layering them with other supplemental data sets, right? Whether it be property data, whether it be behavioral demographic data, whether it be other key credit characteristics. And so what we have found in some of our analysis at Experian is that when layering propensity scores with additional either credit data characteristics or other ancillary data sets, you can actually increase the performance of these models and helping to identify conversion to new trade by 1 to 2x. So layering these propensity scores with other data becomes even more critical and becomes a more critical strategic need as we move into a post sort of trigger environment. Next slide. Now, it is similar to layering of attributes on top of an ITMM. Or a propensity bundle. We call them ITMMs at Experian. The alternative solutions can also include things like propensity bundles. And what this really means is taking attributes that are the most performant, using some statistical analysis, and cherry picking those attributes, identifying consumers that have those attributes, and then targeting those consumers. So we have found that when you leverage attributes that are high performing attributes, we generally see about a 2 to 3x improvement to conversion. It's usually a little north of 2x improvement to conversion when using just traditional credit attributes. So traditional credit attributes would be your traditional credit indicators, things like DTI and equity, things that you typically would be looking at when looking at targetable characteristics of a consumer. But if you were to layer those or bundle those with additional attributes that we've identified, that FPN and Experian have identified, we see typically a much larger, or almost a 2x, an over a 2x rate of conversion when leveraging those attributes. So the layering of attributes and then the bundling of very high performing attributes that have been identified through statistical analysis, regression analysis, we have found is good at identifying consumers who may be in the market, and then also helping identify or find consumers that result in a higher rate of conversion. So this is sort of a science. This is a science solution for identifying consumers that are in the market and can maximize the likelihood of conversion. And this is without using inquiries. And this is going to be even more critical again as we move into a post prospect trigger inquiry based prospecting climate. Next solution. The last one I want to touch on is our custom targeting models. Now, this is a service that can be provided to client lenders, and what this service essentially is that we can take your buy box characteristics, and based on those characteristics, create a customized model that incorporates some of those attributes that we talked about in the previous slides, those high performing attributes, and produce a model, a customized targeting model that can output. You can run consumers through that targeting model, and you can output and score consumers based on that model. And the idea is to find consumers based off that targeting model that have the greatest likelihood of conversion. We have found that these custom targeting models can increase conversion by 3 to 4x. It's very high. Some instances even greater than that. On average, you're looking at about 3 to 4x conversion to a new trade line, to a new mortgage. We had one client who produced a custom model internally and then compared it against one that we produced, and we had found we were seeing a 3 to 4x improvement in conversion. So there are some instances where it can be even greater rate of conversion. And so being more intentional again about how you're using data, creating more custom models. This is work that your clients, your competitors are not doing. So putting in more work to identify consumers that have a greater propensity to convert, leveraging more complex and disparate data using more holistic information to identify consumers and then making the right offer is going to become more and more important in a post-trigger climate. And it's not just identifying those consumers, of course, everything that's happening downstream. So having the right sales EAE engaging with the consumer, having the right offer, the right price point, all of those are obviously very deterministic factors in making sure that those consumers convert. But in identifying those leads, it's more important than ever to spend more time and effort leveraging the right data to identify the correct leads. So not just, hey, this is a numbers game, buy up as many leads as you can. We live in a market now where it is going to be more important for you to spend time, effort, and money in selecting the right leads, so that you can also reduce the cost of acquiring those consumers too. So, any questions around these solutions?
Not seeing any questions in the chat, but I just wanted to confirm all these alternate solutions that you've gone through are all currently available today. Is that correct? Or is this something that, okay, thank you. Okay, well, we will, don't see any questions yet. So I think what we'll do next is go back to Tyler. Tyler, I think you were going to take us through kind of what the workflow management looks like.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you, Robin, and thank you, Ivan. Right, I think there are some pretty incredible solutions, right now, right, to that last question. And frankly, I love the insertion of the list you described, a number of times throughout the product reviews. And quite frankly, I felt like I even learned one or two things there. So thank you, because that's going into my tool belt for other conversations. Let's talk a little bit about how all this comes together. Right. And by the way, I did hear some very recurring themes from what Ivan just noted. I'm going to continue to beat that drum on two of those concepts, right? Which is, the mindset shift to be intentional. That really resonates with me. And then the pivot from a sales representation to a sales advisor, both very effective and important in this changing environment. So, but before I kind of get into the details of what you're seeing here in the screen, allow me just to kind of talk a little bit about what you're looking at. Right? So in this example, all things lead into pre-screen. However, some of them may be done independently as well. But for the sake of the conversation that we're going to have here, we're going to use pre-screen as that glue. Okay. Now, upon delivery of those leads at the bottom side of the screen, there are multiple contact procedures to both inform the consumer as well as meet FOC obligations and close as many loans as possible. We'll walk through each of those. There's also this wheel on the upper right-hand side. I'm not going to spend any more time talking to than right now, but really what that is a reflection of that acquisition marketing never sleeps during the lending process. Information is always being gathered to help make better decisions during the lending process, even when a consumer is sitting on the sidelines, right? And so when it comes to lead management, it may be used to pinpoint, perfect candidates, but also exclude those who might not be in a position to currently transact. A lot of that is going to be emerged through things like propensity scores, naturally, right? But there's other ways in which to leverage those data as it's constantly at the helm, kind of thinking through the best way in which to present acquisition marketing solutions. I'd also say that it's very effective during a portfolio and servicing to watch for risk and retention purposes, right? So as part of that overall flywheel, we're talking really about the very front side of it, but some of these solutions do apply to a portfolio view as well. Okay, so let me kind of dive into how all these come together. First, from a pre-screen perspective, I haven't already talked a lot about it already. But it is a fantastic way to strategically ingest a list of leads that meet your overall business objectives. And there are multiple ways to be able to achieve that goal. Right? The first is kind of just go north there, which is, let's talk about criteria. This is really that lifeblood of the standard pre-screen and allows the filtering of multiple attributes. When I say multiple, in some cases, it's hundreds, right? And if you think about various attributes, in some cases, you might see attributes that are similar to one another. So it's important to know what the key differences are between those as you're establishing your overall criteria set to work towards a pre-screen solution. Secondly, there are the propensity scores, right? To the right-hand side there as we go clockwise a little bit. And we really think about it along two different approaches, of which, Ivan talked about some. We just simplify it in our vernacular, right? To be able to say, hey, the first option is really this rank and prioritize approach, which is receive all the pre-screen orders with a propensity score, ranking them in order of likelihood to transact. And really, this offers the most amount of leads so that none are falling on the floor. And then you can be the first to offer a solution for a potential borrower that is accretive to their needs. And so even though it might be a lower propensity, they still might have activity or interest in pursuing it. Really, the second way that we think about leveraging propensity scores is a filter and focus concept, which is suppressing low likelihood leads from using defined score thresholds within the pre-screen process, thereby absorbing less leads, but maintain and emphasize focus with your sales team. Really just go after those that are going to be the highest to convert. In both scenarios, it's important to really customize and convert, right? And really what this means is to align your offers with the messaging with each consumer's intent and readiness, and learn from what works and doesn't work. Goes back to this mindset, mindset shift to be very intentional. Going to the left a little bit, there are alternative leads in the marketplace, such as internet leads or property leads. Now, they can be leveraged as part of the pre-screen solutions as well. And it's a great way to combine efforts to really differentiate, a lender from one another, right? An example is like internet leads may be from consumer exchanges, third-party websites like a lending tree or realtor sites. Property leads may come from a variety of different sources, but analyzes typically public record information that might exist in like assessment, deed, and mortgage files, alongside certain modeling capabilities to highlight opportunity. Okay, I think the other key area is promotion to that left-hand side there, right? Promotion is often an overlooked use case for pre-screen. However, honestly, it is a perfect fit in many ways. So for example, a wholesaler may offer their brokerage community a promotion for a particular segment of the population, and pre-screen with this criteria selection and propensity alignment is a great way in which to obtain all of those data. And we have the capabilities jointly to be able to meet those needs very, very quickly. And so that's one thing to be thinking about constantly. And then, then we kind of get to the business strategy on the right-hand side, which is really why we're all here, right? There's a need to pivot a potential business strategy from mortgage inquiries or triggers to something else that we're talking about. So, naturally, there's a number of questions that emerge as a part of this every single time, right? That you're thinking about how to be able to go to market. So these are things like, what type of loans does a lender wish to offer? How well versed are the LOs, the loan officers, in the segments that the lender is going to offer? What are the various communication protocols? What are expected timelines? What are the targeted outcomes, right? And there's a lot more questions, right? I think many of you on the phone are probably thinking even more broadly than that and more specific as well. But understanding your business strategy and effectively leveraging these data with an aligned sales force in an ever-changing environment is really that key to success. All right, so now, right, we've talked about how we're going to use in this example pre-screen being the glue. Oh, please, sorry, I got a few more comments on that last slide. Thank you. Once pre-screen is delivered, it's important from a workflow perspective that your firm offer of credit, or FOC, I use them interchangeably, that those obligations are met. But ensuring that all customers obtain this FOC also maximizes a lender's potential for closing loans, right? I mean, if you make a number of phone calls and nobody's picking up, that there are alternatives that you're required to do, but it also does allow you the opportunity to be able to close those additional loans as well. Right, so there are a number of ways in which a firm offer of credit may be extended, and I'm just going to do a highlight, right? Once the methods have been determined, it's important to note that an approval process exists within the Bureau. They need to review and approve them. And then there are standard guidelines in place to assist, and we can assist in that process as well. But there's a few different ways in which to kind of perform that communication set of protocols, right? There's the phone call or use of a dialer. Simply stated, this is a broad way of saying, this is picking up the phone and reaching out to their landline or a mobile phone. There are dialers also that exist to help speed this process up. But overall, the phone capabilities is an effective means to converse with the consumer for alignment on what the lender thinks they may need to what they actually need during that conversation. So, and this can also be used in some cases for texting purposes under the right circumstances. Email, and while it's currently less used from my own experiences, it's an easy way to broadly reach out to customers. And then direct mail is really an evolving and growing strategy from what we've seen that can be positioned as kind of the first experience, the first position, especially in cases where things like the phone DNC exists, do not call exists, or aligns well with business strategy, or really even as a secondary option, right? We see a lot of folks who are going through phone and then finishing up to fulfill their FOC obligations, but also reach the consumer, through a mailer program. So, but before I move on into this loss lead component and how it circles back into the business strategy, I do want to highlight that that firm offer of credit obligations do not change from current trigger requirements. There's no change to that. Additionally, as part of our continued webinar series, you're going to have the opportunity in the future to listen into various options and requirements that are critical to the lead campaign process. So be on the lookout for that, and we'd love to have you attend or listen in at some point. Okay, so let's talk about kind of this examining loss lead that goes right back on into this strategy. And this often overlooked solution is really critical to examine successes and failures and alter your overall approach as necessary. Again, the intentional mindset shift. And there's a number of questions that arises with every pre-screen, right? Which are things like, what was it timely? With what you received, was it timely? Are the LOs well equipped, right? Was there enough leads? Were there too many leads? What led to positive outcomes and what led to negative outcomes? I think all of those things are what you're all kind of dealing with today and making alterations, right? But what if you had access to the disposition of all the leads that you had, right, in that collection set? Let's say you got 10,000 leads, but you but you closed 15 of them, right? How would you know how your competition stacked up? Did they gain access to them? So at a very general level, this is where like a loss lead concept is the answer, and it's a perfect solution to continuously evolve your overall business strategy in this post-trigger environment. Really diving into that just a little bit more, right? Examining that full list of leads over time can help you more deeply understand the customer base you're looking at, thereby answering advanced key questions, right? And so I'll give you a few examples of things like, how many consumers accepted credit elsewhere and what type of product? What are those consumer characteristics? Is there a sweet spot of things like, FICO score, LTV, a Vantage score, propensity score, right? How does that line up? Who ended up closing the loan, right? Is it with a peer or another type of lender? And while these data are anonymized and aggregated, it's very telling, and in my experience has led to much stronger outcomes with customers having utilized these capabilities. So this is where that arrow kind of comes back on in, right? As you learn more, your business strategy adjusts as necessary, altering your overall approach to internet leads, criteria, propensity scores. And as I said it before, I'll say it again, I know I've used that same phrase already. Now is the time to start thinking about that post-trigger success, because your competition has already started. All right, Robin, I'm ready for the next slide when you are. Awesome, thank you. So now there's the practical implementation, right? The workflow kind of answered a lot of the questions. So, for the most part, I'll be fairly brief on this particular slide, right? So we'll discuss a lot of them. First of all, the solutions to the far left-hand side, as discussed, there's many different offerings in this space, many of which are managed through a pre-screening process or even done independently. I'm not going to dive into those again. But it's important to be thinking about, scaling and automation, right? Many existing integrations from trigger solutions are, portable with minimal work to a pre-screen solution, as an example, for dialing and mailing capabilities or plugging into a CRM. In fact, in many cases, those hooks are already in place directly or even through third-party integrations, of which many of us are hooked into. I'd also suggest to start the process now for refining your overall pre-screen needs, right? Once a sweet spot has been achieved, aligning to a time frame that works well within your organization, aligned with the strategy, can be daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, even annually, I suppose, or even ad hoc. We talked about promotions, or a combo platter of the two, based off of how you want to be able to go after those various consumers to help them out. So, we collectively work very hard to deliver these solutions as quickly as possible and are constantly working towards faster solutions as well. So when we talk about scalability and automation, these are the concepts that we're always engaged upon. I think one of the key things, though, is also understanding measurable results. It's a very key factor, and I'd strongly recommend alignment with with your vendor, ideally us here. And here you want to be able to clearly articulate outputs and outcomes, right? And some examples you see here like contact rates, cost of acquisition, closed loan amount, closed loan volumes, right? All these are critical. But there is a lot of flexibility overall to the solutions process, including the bolt-on of communication protocols. And when those are aligned to these key outputs that result in desired outcomes and communicated effectively, really all sides are aligned to that success. And this really leads to the last, and I'm reinforcing again kind of the key component of refining the strategy, intentional mindset, right? But based on the output and outcome success, please provide a feedback loop for positive and negative experiences, or to consistently alter the inputs. We want to be able to leverage institutional knowledge, direct experiences, test and learn, even that loss lead analysis that we talked about, to inform the best way to continue to grow in any market, right? So partner with a provider that cares about your outcomes and act as a true partner by working with you closely to achieve those desired results. So I think that brings us at least to the end of the formal presentation. So I'll pass back to you, Robin, for any further thoughts or questions.
Yes, I do have a few questions that have come over. So the first one, and I'm gonna probably kick this one over to Ivan. You guys might both know the answer, but when specifically will the Experian triggers that data go away?
Sorry about that, was on mute. So great question. So we will be halting the sale of prospect triggers early February. The effective date of the bill is March 5th of next year. So we're doing we're building in some buffer just to make sure that we give clients enough time to shut off their processes. We've got some clients with some special workflows that incorporate triggers. So just adding in some buffer to make sure that we're compliant and our clients and recipients are also compliant.
Thank you. There is another question as well. Would these come with any type of written consent to market via auto dialer or SMS, or would we have to obtain that on our own? If we do need to obtain, what would be the most efficient way? Tyler, and if you need to read the question, you should be able to see it in the Q&A, but are you able to answer that?
Yeah, I'm interpreting that as kind of redefining kind of that firm offer of credit. So when you're talking about a type of written consent to market, yeah, there are various ways in which to kind of pull together, and hopefully I'm answering it appropriately, what that firm offer of credit looks like. And it's going to be different if you're dealing with a mailer, you're dealing with a text, or you're dealing with a phone call, or you're dealing with an incoming phone call. But there is guidance that we can always help with, right, to be able to identify what that script is. At the end of the day, it's going to be on the lender, naturally, to make sure that it is directly aligned on into, how you're going to be performing that firm offer of credit. We can certainly help you, and then each of those do go through the approval process with the Bureau as well to ensure alignment.
Okay, great. I see one more question, so if anyone has them, go ahead and put them in the chat. But the last question I'm seeing is, like on pricing, is the regular pre-screen lead more expensive than the trigger lead, or how does that compare from a pricing standpoint or cost standpoint? Tyler, or I don't know, maybe Tyler, you might be the best one to answer that.
Yeah, I'm happy to start here. There's a lot of inputs that kind of go on into the pre-screen process. So I'll start there, and then I'll talk a little bit about propensity scores, right? The pre-screen process generally has kind of a base model, right? And then there are a series of potential bolt-ons that might be an additional cost, right? So there might be, additional, PII type of information, or some additional property-based information, like maybe a CLTV, right, is a good example. Even trended data as an additional bolt-on to the pre-screen process, and propensity scores as well, right? It would be typically an additional cost kind of coming on into it in some cases, right? And the reason I'm saying that is there are scenarios by which, what is being delivered has a different cost by what you are filtering against. And so it's hard to kind of give an overall wash statement. And I apologize for being slightly elusive, but, certainly want to be able to align it with overall business strategy there. But there's typically going to be a little bit of an additional increase in cost for propensities that are being delivered, but less so when being filtered against.
Thanks, Tyler. And I don't know, Ivan, if you had anything on those questions that you might want to add as well to what Tyler had to say.
No, I think I completely concur and agree with this response. And what's interesting is the cost of pre-screen leads are typically lower than the cost for triggered leads, and that's because there's sort of a premium that's placed on trigger leads, because it's kind of a buying frenzy, right? These are consumers that have shown strong intent, and so it is in some sense kind of a more of a premium lead. So the economies of scale are kind of in the client's benefit when it comes to pre-screen and pre-screen leads. But as you start to layer more and more data and become more intentional and strategic in your approach to pre-screening, then of course the cost starts to add up. But there are solutions in the market, and both between FPN and Experian that exist that are designed to be more cost effective. They allows you to pre-screen as quickly as possible, and get an offer out to market to a consumer as quickly as possible and iterate. So I think FPN is very well positioned to be able to serve the needs of customers in the current market.
Hey, and we did have it looks like another few questions come over. So how is pre-screen data delivered to me, the end user? So Tyler, can you take that one?
Yeah. There's a number of different ways to do it. I would say kind of the classic model, right, is through a text file, CSV file, Excel file, right, that is being sent over through a secure exchange, right. So that's one way, standard, straightforward, and very easy to get set up. Another way that we are able to engage is if there's an API model that you want to be able to employ to put it directly on into your environments, such as a CRM. We can also engage with those, and I mentioned a little bit earlier, we do have some of those capabilities already in place, and in scenarios by which there might not be a direct connection, our API is very flexible to be able to allow that to happen, and we are always available and recognize the need to be able to engage with organizations to make that happen, and they're very rapid on that deployment.
Great, thank you. And the final question I have right here is, and I'm going to go back to you, Tyler, only because I know you can answer it, but I'm not being picky on who I'm
sure
handing these questions to. So who is responsible for delivering the firm offer of credit?
It's the lender. It's the lender's responsibility to be to put that on out there. All the time. They need to be able to monitor, who they've been able to successfully reach on out to, and through what method and protocol, and if asked, have the data available.
Great. So this question is really from me, I guess. But Tyler, if there's folks on the call interested in talking more about this with FPN and I guess or Experian, what would be their next steps? How should they reach out, and what would that process be?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. That's for a lot of the reasons we're here, of course. So there's a few different ways. One is you can always come through our website, fpndata.com, and there's a contact me, right in there. So that's very straightforward, and that will get right on into our sales team. And then we very quickly, easily within 24 hours, often within hours, set up some time to be able to kind of walk through your needs and how we might be able to help there. And then naturally, you can always reach, me as an individual, through LinkedIn. I'm always open and love to communicate, through that communication protocol. So feel free anytime to link me there, text me there, which is not a problem at all. And then you can even use my email. I'm happy to put that on out there. It's Tyler Sword at fpndata.com. let's get a conversation started. We'd love to have them.
And I don't know, Ivan, if you guys have a direct way, if folks were trying to get in touch with you, if there's something you want to put out there to the group.
Yeah, we've got an intake form on Experian.com. So a lot of our solutions are there's a sort of a menu header, and you can select through some of the solutions, and there's an intake form. You can also reach out to any of our sales AEs, or reach out to anyone on this call.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Tyler and Ivan, for sharing all these valuable insights, and appreciate everyone who joined us today. We hope this session helped you see how pre-screening and propensity modeling can provide you a more targeted, cost-effective, and borrower-friendly way to grow your business. If you'd like to learn more, again, like we said, fpndata.com, there is a webinar section on the website. You should, if you're signed up, you will also get, I'm assuming, an email after the fact. And we will have, we do have additional upcoming sessions on different topics, as well as we'll have a recording of today's event. So on behalf of FPN and Experian, thank you again for spending your time with us, and we appreciate your participation and engagement. We look forward to seeing you at a future webinar. So have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.